Okay, welcome back to part 3 of this episode. Today I'm going to be taking a look at 4 more Super Famicoms. So number 9 seems to fire up but won't start the burn-in test. So I'm suspecting that there's an audio circuitry issue, just similar to the one chip console I fixed a couple months ago. So I'm going to take a closer look at the audio circuitry on this one. So after cleaning everything up, I tested out with the burn-in test one more time, and it still locks up as soon as I initiate the test. And then on certain games, such as Street Fighter 2, it locks up at the Licensed by Nintendo screen. So this further concludes that this is an audio issue. So before I start swapping chips, I'm going to swap some of these caps up here, because I suspect that these caps could be bad. So after swapping out these caps, I got no change, so now I'm going to swap out the audio chips. Now I don't know which chip is bad, so I'm going to start with the one on the left first, and then I'll go to the one on the right. So off camera I've been busy. I actually swapped out all the chips that pertain to the audio circuitry, and I got the test to fire up, but it still failed on the APU. So I still got plenty of good chips on this board besides the APU circuitry, so I'm going to use this board for a donor. So not to waste too much time on the previous one, on to number 10. This one had a garbled image, and it seems to start up, but the image quality is a little bit shoddy, so the sound seems to be working well. It's just the image is just flickery, and it's not as perfect as it should be. And right in here you see a lot of ghosting, a lot of distortion, like saturation issues. So I suspect this one has bad caps. Now there's a bit of corrosion on these caps, so I think I did find the issue here. So I'm trying to reflow them just to warm up the pad, try to lift them up without tearing a trace, and it seems to be okay, it seems to be working. So after I remove all the caps, I like to add fresh new solder to the pads just to reflow them a bit, and then I'll clean up all the excess flux. So after replacing those 6 caps, I'm going to test it one more time and see what I get. So as you can see on the startup screen there's no more distortion, there's no more flickering, and on this next screen you don't see that distortion anymore. No more ghosting, everything is clear. So one last thing to note, this console had a cracked corner, so I'm going to re-glue it right now. So the picture is clear, the sound is clear, and this corner doesn't look too bad. I mean, it doesn't look as good as the other ones, but a glued corner is better than a cracked corner, I guess. Now when I was cleaning this with alcohol, it seems I rubbed off the Super Famicom logo. Now I suspect that this is due to being one of the early units. In the early revision models, they had different ink that would come off with alcohol. Later on they changed that so people can clean their consoles. So just keep in mind, if you have one of the early units, be careful with the alcohol on the front ink. So on to another one with a garbled image. Now upon lifting the lid here, I noticed there's a lot of lint in this one. This is one of the dirtiest units I've gotten out of this lot so far. But there's no bugs, that's what surprises me. They must not have bugs in Japan, because all these consoles are just dirty from lint or Coca-Cola, but no insects. So it seems as though this one had a garbled image before, but just cleaning that bracket there, it solved all my problems. The image comes in clear, it has sound. So it just goes to show, even if you have a garbled image, it doesn't mean that the console has a hardware failure. It might just need to be cleaned. So after testing it with a few more other games, it seems to be working. I cleaned it, I assembled it, and it seems to be working well. So on to the next one. So on to the last one. Now I suspect this one's going to have some hardware failure, just simply because it fails the burn-in test cartridge. So this is the screen I get, and it does fail 2 tests. So let's try it with a game. So here's Donkey Kong Country. Now immediately on that logo it just looks horrible. It's distortion all over the place, the graphic glitches, and even the sound is off. So does anybody have an exorcist? Was that a cackle demon from Doom sound? Now the select game screen is bouncing to the beat. I don't get it. Okay, enough joking. Let's tear this thing apart. Now since this does fail tests on the burn-in test cartridge, I suspect it has a bad CPU, so that's the first thing I'm going to swap. But upon first inspection, I see a little shiny drop, maybe solder splash or some metallic object. I'm going to pull that off and then test it before I even take this chip off. No, that would have been too easy. I still got no change, so I'm going to remove this chip. Now I don't know why I went over these pads with my iron and then cleaned off the flux just to run over them with a piece of desoldering braid. Sometimes I do weird things, so just bear with me. So as always, what I usually like to do is go over the four corners without flux, just touch up the four corners first, anchor it down, and then go over with some flux so the chip won't move, and solder the chip in place. So after I clean up the flux, I noticed that it looks as though there's a little solder bridge. So let me just touch that up before I start this console up. Well, it seems as though it fired up. It's not a blue screen, but it's still distorted. But it does pass all the tests, so I don't think it's a bad PPU. This seems familiar to me. Let me test it with a few other games and see if I have a similar fault here. As you can see, Star Fox seems to be distorted or flickery, and then we have that same screen as before. So what solved the issue before was bad caps. So that seems to be about right. If it passed all the tests, the games fire up. Next thing to do is look at these caps, and upon first inspection you can clearly see they're corroded. So I'm going to swap these 6 caps and see if there's a change. I tried my best to not lift these pads, but I had no choice. This board was so bad that the pad went with the cap. Yeah, so that's the second pad right there. But it seems like both of these caps, they're in circuit with each other. So I have an idea on how to solve this. So I'll just take a component leg and create a bridge. And I'll do that for both sides. So I'll take this time right now to remind everyone why I do these videos. It's more for future reference, because later down the road, as these consoles deteriorate, most of these problems are similar to each other, or some of them are similar to each other, and they can be easily fixed if people know what the fault is. Like for instance, in this video, I had one Super Famicom with a distorted image, and then this console here, I swapped the CPU and I had the same fault as one of the previous units. So with these videos, they can be very helpful for future console repairs for everyone in the community. So that's why I feel it's important to document solutions and fixes on camera, so we can have a guide for the future. And then I'll go over with a multimeter just to test continuity, make sure the two legs are touching each other and the other two legs that aren't supposed to touch each other are not in continuity. So as you can see, all those caps are replaced. It's not the prettiest job, but as long as the console works, that's all that matters. So as you can see, the image is crystal clear. So it had a bad CPU coupled with bad caps, but now it's working. Okay, so here's everything cleaned up, and let's test Donkey Kong one more time. So I'm just gonna fast forward here, and it seems to be working. So all in all, I got 10 out of 12 to work, so that's a pretty good success rate. So it just goes to show, not everything you buy online is absolute trash. With a little bit of time and effort, you can get it to work. So I hope you like this project. This was a lot of work for me, but I'm so glad that it's done, so I can move on to something different. So if you like this, please like, comment, and subscribe. And once again, thank you for watching.